Hey there, everyone. That sexy nerd is back again. And I'm sorry I'm really late on this, but I thought I'd just do this now. They're doing the gunfight at OK Corral on Extra History. So that means we're doing Wyatt Earp. I've already seen the Tombstone thing of history buffs. I know a little bit more about this incident, but Extra History always goes above and beyond, so there's always something new you can learn, right? They're also hopefully going to go more into Doc Holliday and all the other characters and actually maybe fully explain a little bit more about how his brothers were killed. Not much we can say about it. I'm doing parts 1 and 2 because, like I said, I'm a little late on it. So why don't we just get into the episode? And remember, please smash that like button if you want to see more sexy and nerdy content, and subscribe if you think I deserve it. And let's do this thing, y'all.
It's 9 in the morning on a cold Wednesday. The bars have been open all night, and Ike Clanton hasn't stopped drinking. Later, he will, of course, sober up, and he will do so very quickly. But that, of course, is later. For now, he's drunk, belligerent, and shouting at anyone who will listen that he's going to kill Doc Holliday, a short-tempered former dentist with whom, for reasons that will probably never become fully clear, he's had a long-standing feud with. And it's in this particular moment that he's lit the fuse of a complex, multi-part powder keg that will explode in approximately 6 hours' time and echo into legend. The gunfight at the OK Corral. Thanks so much to Clarendon and their new cooperative party game, Priorities, for sponsoring today's historical tale.
I'm such a dork.
Tombstone was founded in 1879 by an optimistic prospector named Ed Schifflin. Go prospecting in those hills, local folks told him, and all you're gonna find is your tombstone. Yeah, well, Ed got the last laugh, folks told him, and all you're gonna find is your tombstone. Yeah, well, Ed got the last laugh, as during his endeavor, he hit a seam of silver and became a very rich man. A mining camp sprung up swiftly after his find, and within 2 years, it became a prosperous and growing town. And in fond acknowledgement of his many doomsayers, Schifflin named the place Tombstone. It was a busy modern town, filled with bars, restaurants, brothels, and more bars. Yeah, people kind of drank a lot. There wasn't really much else to do with your free time around there. Of course, boredom and liquor often give rise to lawlessness. And where there's lawlessness, the law tends to follow. In this instance, it came in the shape of one Virgil Earp, who had enlisted his younger brothers, Wyatt and Morgan, as deputies. The evening Ike Clanton began mouthing off, Virgil had been policing the streets all night long. He's just exhausted and wants nothing more than to go home and sleep, but the news that Clanton is stumbling around threatening Doc Holliday keeps him out. Now, Virgil normally wouldn't care what nonsense a drunk bully like Clanton might spout, but Doc Holliday is a friend to the Earps. Though, more than that, Virgil also knows that Holliday has a well-earned reputation as a hothead who probably wouldn't think twice about gunning Ike down in the street. Frankly, Virgil doesn't want to have to deal with the paperwork around that, so he goes to find his brothers. He repeats what he's heard. Now, Virgil knows that Doc and Wyatt are friends, and Doc's the most likely to listen to Wyatt. So Virgil sets his brothers to task and goes home for what's probably the last good night's rest in his life. Wyatt and Morgan then go off to search for Doc, finding him at a card table in the Oriental Saloon. Now, John Henry Doc Holliday crossed paths with Wyatt Earp several times before joining him in Tombstone. Maybe those prior meetings were coincidence, or maybe destiny. Either way, Wyatt Earp and Doc Holliday will be inextricably linked due to the events that take place later that day. But right this moment, a confrontation seems unlikely. Don't care what Clanton says, Doc reassures the Earps. He couldn't hit a barn door with a banjo. Don't worry none, boys. I'll be fine. He goes back to his game, winning and losing in equal measure. Though for a notorious gambler, Doc never makes his fortune. Whenever he wins big, he just gambles it all away again. He lives in the moment, and for good reason. He's 30 years old, his body is riddled with tuberculosis, and he's living on borrowed time. So he treats every day as a gift, and he's dang sure he will make the most of it. And perhaps, knowing his life's outlook, Wyatt and Morgan are not entirely reassured at Doc's response, but leave the former dentist to his card games and go on with their day, keeping one eye open. Elsewhere, Ike Clanton keeps drinking. Now, nobody ever quite put their finger on exactly why Ike Clanton was baying for Doc Holliday's blood. Though there was some whispers that Wyatt and Doc had collaborated with Clanton on a probably less than legal money-making scheme. Ike got the idea that Doc was going to betray him to the authorities, started drinking, and then that idea became his reality.
Oh, so we're here.
He'd aggressively confronted Doc the previous night, but nobody really noticed. See, because not a day went by in Tombstone without someone mortally offending someone else. Virgil had introduced a no guns within the city limits law that people occasionally adhered to, which meant that Doc and Ike's spat shouldn't really escalate beyond harsh language. Hence, Doc brushed off Ike with the disdain he felt he deserved. So there's a very good chance that Ike, Wyatt, and Doc were mixed up in something that they shouldn't have been. And while Wyatt and Doc were able to keep their mouths tightly shut, the neurotic Clanton simply could not. His own certainty that Doc was going to get him into trouble took over everything. Of course, it probably doesn't help that Ike was, to put it bluntly, not the brightest button in the box, and Doc did take pleasure in denigrating his intelligence by confounding the farmer with riddles and conundrums. Doc also considered himself too clever and sophisticated for Tombstone, and never thought twice about causing offense. Yeah, Doc Holliday was not a nice man. His illness is hard on him, and he numbs that pain with booze. This serves only to make him more angry, more bitter, and that means he's a man who frequently acts first and thinks later, often from behind cell bars. But back to Ike. Finally kicked out of the last bar in town, Ike has to quit drinking. Maybe he sleeps the worst of it off somewhere, or maybe he just goes home and knocks back a few more glasses of Old Overholt, but wherever he is, he exits stage left for now, leaving room for us to bring in the other players in this sorry tale. Tom McClary, Ike's friend, has heard what's going on, and has come to town to see if he can help. Or, as it's more likely, catch a piece of whatever action is going on. Unfortunately for Tom, he makes the mistake of running into Wyatt first, whose patience is easily tested. The two get into a disagreement, which ends, as many things do, with Wyatt pistol whipping him and dragging him into the courthouse for disturbance of the peace. Just one more bullet into the six-shooter of destiny. Okay, all of the disturbance of the peace. Just one more bullet into the six-shooter of destiny. Okay, all of the pieces are nearly on the board. We have the three Earp brothers. We have Doc Holliday. We have Ike and Tom. All we need now is Tom's older brother, Frank, and Ike's baby brother, Billy. Those two are currently minding their own business, eating lunch at the Grand Hotel, and you know what? They're probably having a pretty nice day. When all of a sudden, someone crashes in to tell Frank and Billy that Ike is on the warpath and Tom has incurred the wrath of Wyatt Earp. That's probably when their nice day came to an end. Actually, there's something in the air in Tombstone today, and it's not just the chill or the snow. There's a sense of hush, kind of like the town taking a deep breath before plunging into a lake. Ike's friends go out hunting for him in hopes of sobering him up, but to no avail. So the Clantons and McClarys just meet up and begin to whisper in hushed tones, while the Earps meet at Haffer's Corner, whispering in hushed tones of their own. Destiny is hollerin', and the two factions are ready to answer the siren's call. Now it's around 3 in the afternoon when Doc saunters by, unaware or simply not caring that he's caused this tension. He's reminded about Ike's threats of murder, and once again, just shrugs it off. Then Virgil, perhaps foolishly, tells Doc that the brothers are going to find the Clantons and the McClarys. Doc wants in, but Virgil tells him there's no need for him to get involved. And here is where Doc's famous temper begins to flare up, at being told to stay out of business that is quite clearly his to be involved in. "That is a hell of a thing for you to say to me," Doc says to Virgil, to which Virgil concedes that Doc is too involved to actually not be involved. So he accepts Doc's offer to help watch their backs and swaps his shotgun with the dentist's walking cane.
So is this really how it worked? Because I thought Wyatt was leading the charge and Virgil was just, oh, right. Well, I didn't see the damn movie. I only saw History Buff, so I guess you don't. He was going like, oh, it's not what I want. Virgil was Sam, right? It was played by Sam Worthington, right? You know, the guy you can never understand.
This allows Virgil to approach unarmed and thus appear conciliatory rather than threatening. "Now you're just there to back me up," Virgil tells Doc, pointing to the shotgun. "You understand?" Oh, Doc understands. A helpful passerby informs the lawmen that the Clantons and the McClarys were seen buying ammunition a little while ago, then headed off to collect their horses. Maybe, Virgil suggests, they're already leaving town. But the Earps decide it's best to make sure that they actually do leave. Walking in a line, with Doc whistling a cheerful tune and a shotgun concealed beneath his greatcoat, they all saunter down the street and into immortality. Now, there are countless fictional retellings of the altercation, and nobody will ever know the full facts. Heck, even Wyatt Earp, when pressed, couldn't remember the specifics. But one thing is for certain. In our next episode, 30 shots will ring out over Tombstone, one for each second of a legendary gunfight. Wow. Tick, tick, tick. Fremont Street. Tombstone, Arizona territories. October 26, 1881. Now, gunshots are not uncommon in a town where disagreements happen on a daily basis. 30 of them, though. Now that's unusual. In a vacant lot off Fremont Street, next to Fly's photographic studio, two groups that have been staring each other down for weeks are about to collide. One faction, known as the Cowboys, have been feuding with the gambler/dentist, Doc Holliday, and the tension's gotten so bad that Doc's friend, Deputy Marshal Virgil Earp, has ordered them to leave town before violence erupts. They're in an alley near the OK Corral, readying their horses, and maybe if they'd been left alone, they would have followed his instructions. But Virgil and his brothers, plus Holliday himself, are on their way to make sure the Cowboys really leave. They're coming with guns, and soon, Fremont Street will ring with those aforementioned 30 shots, raining through the town in 30 seconds. Today's epic showdown is made possible by our creator-owned and operated streaming service, Nebula, where lifetime memberships are back for a limited time this holiday season. But more on that after the shootout. Okay, let's fully set the scene of this showdown, shall we? On one side, the Cowboys. Ike Clanton, whose drunken threats to kill Doc Holliday have started this mess, plus his little brother Billy. Next to them, Tom and Frank McClary have already saddled their horses and are ready to leave. And finally, their friend Billy Claiborne makes 5. And on the other side are the lawmen. Deputy Marshal Virgil Earp, his brothers Wyatt and Morgan, and their friend Doc Holliday. 5 cowboys, 4 lawmen. Fairly even odds. Not that odds matter to Virgil, however. He's focused, determined to see the Cowboys out of town with as little fuss as possible. The McClary's horses partially obscure the Cowboys from Virgil's sight, so he can't really see what they're doing. But he steps forward regardless to take control of the situation. "Throw your hands up, boys," he says. "I want your guns." Mind you, Virgil isn't holding a gun. He borrowed Doc's silver-topped walking cane. The two sides are about 8 feet apart when Doc raises his shotgun. He doesn't fire it, however. He's just covering Virgil, keeping his promise to only fire if absolutely necessary. But at the sight of the weapon, Frank McClary and Billy Clanton draw and aim their revolvers. "Hold," Virgil says, stepping forward and raising the walking cane. "I don't want that." The first 2 shots being fired before he even finishes his sentence. Perhaps the raised cane looked more threatening than he thought. And to this day, it's unclear exactly who shot first. Billy Clanton then shoots at Wyatt. And in response, Wyatt fires at the bigger threat, Frank McClary, who has a reputation as a gunfighter. At these shots, Billy Claiborne books it out the back, exiting our story as quickly as he arrived.
Okay,
then
but if
Ike
he saw...
Clanton, who again instigated all of this, rushes up to Wyatt, babbling that he's unarmed. Wyatt shoves him away. "Get to fighting or get out of here!" Ike runs for his life. Meanwhile, Morgan draws and fires off 2 shots of his own. Virgil, swearing and fumbling with Doc's cane, finally drops it and cross-draws his own weapon. Amid the chaos, though, Doc hasn't fired. He's still following Virgil's orders.
Really?
The gunshots echoing in the confined space spooks the horses. They rear and buck, adding to the confusion. Then Tom McClary throws his hand to his right hip, ready to draw his weapon, but Doc responds instinctively. He steps around the horse, acting as Tom's shield, and unloads both barrels of the shotgun directly into Tom's chest. McClary staggers back, but doesn't fall. Doc throws the spent shotgun down, drawing his revolver and rejoining the fight. Everybody's shooting now. Billy Clanton's hit in the side and falls to the ground. Morgan is struck in his right shoulder, the bullet tearing through his body and out the other side, missing vital organs by inches. Today isn't Morgan's day to die. Wyatt blazes at Frank, hitting him in the abdomen, while Frank stumbles away, trying to get to his horse. A lucky shot from Billy Clanton strikes Virgil in the calf. But with the tenacity and sheer bloody-mindedness of his family, Virgil keeps fighting. Morgan does too, dragging himself up to a sitting position so he can keep shooting. Only Wyatt has stood still this entire gunfight. Doc's world narrows. It's him and Frank McClary now. He sights in. But suddenly, a wild shot grazes Doc's hip, infuriating him. He squeezes the trigger. But nothing happens. A misfire, out of ammunition? Ugh, it hardly matters. In this moment, Doc realizes that this is how he dies. He embraces the notion, flings his arms out, presenting himself as a target to Frank. "I have you now, Lunger," Frank growls, raising his gun. "Blaze away, Frank," Doc says. "You're a daisy if you have." But just as Frank is about to put a hole in Doc, Wyatt and Morgan zero in on him, firing almost simultaneously. And a fingernail-sized ball of lead slams into Frank's skull,
nice
killing
shot.
him in an instant. Silence descends. The men look through the drifting gun smoke at what the past half minute has wrought. Frank McClary's dead. The wounded Tom follows him into eternity shortly afterwards. 19-year-old Billy Clanton takes longer to expire, in terrible, agonizing pain, despite 2 shots of morphine. Among the lawmen, 2 of the Earp brothers and Doc Holliday are injured, with only Wyatt escaping entirely unscathed. The fight was over, but in many ways, the feud was just beginning. After the events of that fateful October day in Tombstone, things unraveled quickly. The Earps and Doc were arrested and tried for the murder of the McClary brothers and Billy Clanton. And though they were acquitted within a month, the bile did not settle. 2 months after the gunfight, a group of men ambushed Virgil in the street, shooting him in the back with 3 loads of buckshot. He survived, but lost the use of his left arm. Several men from the cowboy faction, including Ike Clanton, were arrested for the crime, but then let go for lack of evidence. In May, several months after the Fremont Street fight, another group of assassins murdered Morgan Earp, shooting him in the back as he played billiards. Wyatt then loaded the wounded Virgil onto a train with Morgan's body and went out for vengeance. Forming a federal posse that included Holliday, Wyatt led a vendetta that sought out any allies of the cowboys he could find. They killed 4 men and fled to Arizona after being charged with murder and pursued by marshals. But that's a story for another time.
Well, what the
Eventually,
hell?
life returned to whatever passed for normal in Tombstone. The Earps never did end up mining for silver like they intended to. Doc never made his fortune playing cards. Though eventually he did head out to Colorado, where he passed away 6 years later at the age of 36, dying just as he'd lived, in debt and defiant. And in Tombstone, the altercation was largely forgotten. After all, it was not the only feud or shootout in the West at that time, and was only notable in how many died. Only years later, when he was being interviewed for his biography as a frontier lawman, that Wyatt Earp discussed the Fremont Street fight. And by that time, his recollections were hazy. Details have been called into question, including the time frame and number of bullets fired. Modern reenactments of the gunfight average around 19 bullets in a 30-second period, rather than his claim of 30. Maybe Wyatt was exaggerating, maybe he truly didn't recall. Still, that account caught the spirit of a generation who viewed those heady days of the Wild West as something mythological, and who were very eager for tales of the past. The story took off like wildfire, and despite Wyatt always referring to it as the Fremont Street fight, and it having taken place in an empty lot, early newspaper accounts saddled it with the name of the nearby OK Corral, and popular culture followed suit. Wyatt himself ended up living through the turn of the century, and got to witness things like the birth of Hollywood. And in his later years, he actually became an advisor on several silent Western films. And John Wayne once claimed that he modeled his own cowboy persona after Earp after having met him once on a film set. By the time Wyatt died in 1929, at the age of 80, the story of the gunfight at the OK Corral had taken on a life of its own. The first movie depiction came in 1932, followed by 8 more.
Jeez.
Television got in on the action as well, and so by the end of the century, the gunfight had been immortalized in countless films and adaptations, each more dramatic than the last, and each equally loose with the facts. Many of the depictions outright cast the Earps as heroic lawmen, despite history telling us their motives were likely a little more murky. But perhaps the after effects of the gunfight linger most in Tombstone itself, whose tourism industry is built around the violent conflict, which is reenacted multiple times a day. An event vaguely recalled by one of its only survivors, which grew into an American legend famous around the world. One where, over 150 years later, you can still see 2 groups of men approaching each other in front of Fremont Street, across from the OK Corral. And if you've enjoyed saddling up to this slice of history,
Boy, so I guess that's it. Yeah, that was pretty good. But I feel like they should go into a little bit more. I don't know if they're gonna finish off the rest of the story. There's plenty more to tell, like a whole bunch of stuff that Wyatt went through. If they're really gonna tell that story next, I hope they do. What did you guys think? It is pretty much what I saw. Actually, like, some of the stuff I've heard is a little contradictory compared to what I heard in history buffs. But let me know what you think in the comments below. And remember, please smash that like button if you want to see more sexy and nerdy content, and subscribe if you think I deserve it. And let's do this thing. And I'll see you on the next episode.